Awesome. Great. Good morning, everyone. Happy GIS Day. My name is Nikki Wong. I'm a product engineer at Esri on the Learn ArcGIS team, and I'm very glad to be here this morning with you all and to be part of LA County's GIS Day and share with you all how you can get started with applying the racial equity workflow to GIS. So today I'm going to share about that workflow, and I'm going to demo a couple of ArcGIS tutorials relevant to each of the stages of the workflow. And I'm going to close by sharing GIS learning resources for racial equity so you can continue equity workflow work in your GIS in your organizations. So just a little bit of context and background for how I ended up in this space. My background is in urban studies and public health, and I spent 6 years as a grassroots community organizer in South Los Angeles, where I lived and worked alongside my neighbors, advocating for public health and environmental justice policies at the city of LA and county level. GIS maps played a really critical role in my organization's ability to obtain funding, to create safe routes to schools, and to hold toxic air polluting companies accountable. And now at Esri, I get to create learning content to equip students and GIS community in using ArcGIS to advance equity in their contexts and organizations. So a lot of what I will share certainly has been influenced from that time I got to spend in South LA. So the core of what I want to share today is just to offer this framework of how to apply racial equity to GIS. This workflow is derived from emerging best practices for advancing racial equity and social justice. The team at Esri who worked on this partnered with community partners and subject matter experts to infuse those standards with best practices for GIS and location intelligence. So I'll go into more depth in each of these steps. I want to start with the middle, engaging communities. So when creating racially equitable solutions, it's so important to continuously include the perspectives of impacted community members and stakeholders who are experiencing the inequities firsthand. The community is often referred to people who live, work, or play in a given area, but you can also consider businesses and local organizations that might have a vested interest in racial equity. And this step of engaging communities, if you notice, is right in the middle. It runs parallel to all of the other stages of the workflow. So as we discuss each stage, notice the opportunities to engage the community in each of them. So the workflow typically starts at the map and analyze inequities stage with an initial assessment. So this might include determining what are the disparities and outcomes or community conditions your organization is aiming to prioritize and address. At this stage, it's very critical that the community is involved to ground truth that the issue is indeed a felt priority. Next, you want to identify and obtain the data you need to support an effective analysis. Is census data efficient? Does it have the measure or variables that you need to appropriately answer your question? Maybe you'll find the data you need in the LA Data Hub. Do you need to collect the data? This is another great space to collaborate with the community. They might have access to the data that you need or can draw on trusted relationships to help you collect that data. And then once you have that data, you can assess the inequities. And at this stage, it's also important to show the assessment to the community and get validation. It might be an iterative process where you realize you need more data or you need to ask a different question so that your assessment really reflects lived experiences. So to demonstrate this step, I'm going to demo the ArcGIS tutorial, Policy Mapping, Improve Newborn Health. So on the Learn ArcGIS team, we write scenario-based step-by-step lessons and tutorials that you can follow and basically learn by doing GIS. So a link to this presentation will be made available to you, and this is the link to check out that tutorial. So I'm just going to demo a portion of it just to illustrate the workflow step. So we'll start with a map of California, and the counties are symbolized by the percent of babies born with low birth weight. So in order to make an assessment of whether there is a racial disparity, I want to create a layer on top of this one that communicates if there is a disparity between different racial groups of low birth weight babies. So I'll duplicate this layer, and I want to start by making sure I have the data I need. So I'm going to map the percent of low birth weight babies born to Black mothers and hide my bottom layer. And I see that I don't have data for every single county. So I'm going to filter that out so that I don't include that in my analysis. So I'm going to create a filter. And I want to see all of the counties that I have data for Black mothers. All right. And now, instead of symbolizing simply by the percentage of low birth weight, I'm going to use Arcade to calculate a rate ratio. So to calculate a rate ratio, you divide the rate of an outcome for one group by another group. So I'm going to use the rate of low birth weight babies born to Black mothers relative to white mothers. So the result of this division, if it equals 1, that means the rate is equal. But if the rate is greater than 1, that means there is a greater burden on Black mothers. So I'll click done, and it calculates it on the fly. Gotta love Arcade. Click, and I'm going to choose the color and size style. And since 1 is our critical number for the rate ratio, I'm going to style it by the above and below theme for above and below. And I wanted to set this to 1 to be the critical break, but it looks like every single county that has data for Black mothers with babies with low birth weight all have a higher rate of low birth weight babies compared to white mothers. So now having these 2 layers together, I not only get a map of where there is just a higher rate of low birth weight babies in the state, but I'm also seeing what areas are experiencing a racial disparity. So that's an example of the first step. So the next stage of the workflow is to operationalize best practices. So this involves creating actionable solutions to address disparities. It involves planning and designing equitable allocation of resources by identifying the barriers and opportunities in a given community to address inequities you have prioritized. So this might involve combining data to understand intersectionality of the data. You might want to identify a suitable location to deliver that resource or service. And once you've identified, you want to propose the changes, like maybe leveraging those assets you identified to address the barrier. And then through each of these steps, again, the community plays an important role in confirming the priorities and the capacity to carry out the plan. And finally, it is also important to make space to potentially augment the workflow and make adjustments as feedback and new circumstances arise. So to demonstrate this step, I'm going to walk through the workflow of our ArcGIS tutorial, Customize a Climate Resilience Index. So this workflow involves taking a federal level index and customizing it to the local level. This index is looking at which census tracts would present the greatest benefit of opening a cooling center. So for areas that experience really high temperatures and have populations that maybe don't have access to air conditioning or ways to stay cool and healthy, a cooling center can be a solution. So one thing about these federal level indices is while they're great for getting a big picture overall, if you're going to use it for decisions at the local level, it really is best practice to customize an index for your given jurisdiction or area and community for a specific intervention. So if we zoom into LA County, this is what the federal level version of the index suggests where there needs to be, where there would be benefit to have the cooling center. But the tutorial will walk you through how can you add a couple more indicators and customize that index so that it's more specific to a local area. So that national level index includes just 3 indicators: high summer average land surface temperature, the percent of population that is older adults, the percent of population without a personal vehicle. So the tutorial will walk you through how can you add the indicator for where is the percentage areas that have a high percentage of population of color, and the percentage of households with incomes below the poverty level in the past year. And the result is this customized index map. And to compare it with the federal level index, for those who are more familiar with LA, like we kind of know where the historically underserved areas are and where there are lots of cumulative burdens that our communities are facing. It is a little more refined and is more clear for where you might propose an intervention. In this step, it's also important to think about when you're sharing your maps with your with the community to think about, what might be some relevant information to the audience. So if you are proposing, where to put cooling centers to a supervisor's office, you can put more local level jurisdictional lines in. You might include where are the existing community assets where a cooling center could be set up. So I've got some libraries and some schools shown here on top of where census tracts have been identified with the index for really being beneficial to the community. You might also include integrating funding opportunities to access resources to implement your plans. So this layer leaves in color the areas that are identified by the Justice 40 map as designated disadvantaged areas that will be earmarked for federal funding to address equity initiatives. So that is operationalizing best practices. Finally, the last stage in the workflow is to manage performance. And this involves evaluating your goals and assessing if your initiative or intervention is achieving a more equitable outcome. So this might include creating maps and apps, hub sites like I saw the LA County Equity Explorer was showing. Those are all great ways to manage performance, to create in transparency, create a way for real-time status updates so the community and decision makers are up to date on how you are doing in meeting your equity goals. So another example I just wanted to quickly highlight is the COVID-19 dashboard from Milwaukee County. They include different equity indicators, and by building this into their dashboard, it enables them to monitor evolving community conditions and help increase their racial equity priorities so that decision makers can see the big picture and quickly gain insight into where they're at. So that is the racial equity and social justice workflow to map and analyze inequities, operationalize best practices, manage performance, all while engaging communities throughout the whole workflow. So I want to share some more resources and learning tools for you to continue learning more about advancing equity. We at Learn ArcGIS support a number of curriculum projects that are designed as learning pathways. Each of these curriculums include interactive apps, videos, the tutorials that I demoed earlier in this presentation. It's just a great way to have a bit of a guided, but free-form way to gain some GIS skills. I especially wanted to highlight the Delete the Divide GIS pathway. It was designed in partnership with LA County's Delete the Divide initiative for K-12 students and educators. And it just covers a lot of really interesting topics that might be of interest to young people. There are videos to give them a preview of what they might learn and series of tutorials that they can go through to start gaining skills in GIS. Some other curriculums that I wanted to highlight is the modern GIS curriculum. It's fairly new. It's all about how to use web-based GIS. Our GIS for Climate Resilience curriculum just dropped today for GIS Day, covers examples of how cities and towns can equip themselves for climate resiliency. And then the health information system is all about how do you use geospatial capacity for health and human services. And finally, if you wanted to check out the tutorials that I demoed and explore other ones, the Racial Equity Hub is Esri's main site for finding data, maps, apps, articles, solutions for using GIS to advance racial equity. On this site, you'll see the collection of tutorials that I demoed, so I invite you to check those out and try them out yourself. So yeah, thank you. Feel free to reach out if you want to discuss anything or if you're interested in partnering with us to develop learning content. We're always excited to partner with others to just help support and equip the GIS community. So yeah, we'll open it up for questions and discussion now.